Welcome to How to Make a Newsletter Your Fans Love to Read with Kelsey Crawford. Thank you, Kelsey, for coming today.
Thank you
So,
for having me.
Kelsey Crawford is a comic artist, illustrator, and concept artist based in Toledo, Ohio. They've been making comics since 2013 and running Fantasyville Productions LLC since 2018. They've drawn a lot of webcomics over the years, including the LGBTQ plus fantasy adventure The Legend of Jamie Roberts. When not making comics, they play tabletop role-playing games with friends and care for three goblins disguised as cats. To you, Kelsey.
Thank you so much for having me. And with that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen, my little presentation that I put together for everybody for how to make a newsletter that your fans love to read, as said by someone who's been running a newsletter for 10 plus years. So I appreciate everybody's patience while we were going through the tech stuff. So now we can just launch right into it. So Um, Rivka did do an introduction, but just real brief. Who am I? Well, I'm Kelsey Crawford. I've been making comics since 2013, like professionally. Before that, I was a caricature artist at an amusement park for like 3 summers. So, art's been in the biz for a while. I started my newsletter at the same time that I started making comics and webcomics. I didn't think that the newsletter would be my chief marketing tool, but here we are because I quit Facebook in 2020. I quit Twitter in 2016. I quit Instagram like 2 years ago. I never really used Tumblr for professional reasons, and I left TikTok like a year and a half ago. So, like, the newsletter is like the best way for folks to stay in touch with me, to be honest. So, why newsletters though? Well, I just detailed why I left. Well, I left a lot of social media platforms, but I didn't specify why. Social media platforms are not eternal, as we are watching right now. Um, we're also witnessing, if you'll excuse my language, the enshittification process of a lot of these platforms. If you want to know more about that, look up Cory Doctorow's lecture about that, because that's a whole other bag of M&Ms. We're not going to get into that right now. Um, why newsletters? Because websites are great, but folks don't always bookmark your site and they don't always bookmark your webcomic. Newsletters are a more personal way to communicate rather than like tweets or Facebook posts or Instagram posts or anything like that. Newsletters are a lot more intimate. Um, and they are a more direct way to stay in touch with your fans because it's like email to email, and that's a lot more personal and a lot more direct. You might be thinking to yourself, what? Because, like, look, there might be folks who would be jazzed to start a newsletter, but there might be several buts that might be getting in the way. So I want to address them one at a time. You might be thinking, but I don't have anything to share. You're an artist. Yes, you do. Maybe you're thinking, but I have nothing to say. Again, you're an artist. Share your work. Or you might be thinking, but I don't want to be annoying. What's more annoying, 10,000 Instagram notifications or one email arriving in your inbox from someone you're excited to stay in touch with? Those are my rebuttals for the butts. So, question for you would be, what do you want your newsletter to be? Because everybody has a different approach to their newsletter. Do you want it to be where you announce your next convention appearance? Do you want it to be a peek behind the scenes? Do you want it to be where you post your updates for the shop, like letting people know when you've got some new stuff in, when old stuff is going out, when you have stuff on sale, like when you're moving, for example? Do you want your newsletter to be a combination of all of these or something else entirely? It's okay if this changes over time. When I first started my newsletter, it was just a place for me to share the behind the scenes stuff, and then it eventually evolved into having all of these and more features. Question you can ask yourself too when you want to start a newsletter is, how frequently do you want to update this thing? I know some artists who only update once a month, and that could be because they don't do a lot of conventions or other shows. Maybe they don't have the energy or the time for once a week, so they just keep it to once a month, and that's totally fine. It's your email newsletter. The energy that you put into it is up to you. And sometimes if you need to take a break for like a week, that's totally fine too. Just be transparent with your newsletter subscribers and say, because the thing is, I send my newsletters out once a week. Asterisk. um, Sometimes if there's something big going on, like offline, I will skip a week, but I try to let people know ahead of time when I'm taking a break from the newsletter. But in general, my newsletter goes out once a week publicly. I actually have a dedicated newsletter segment just for patrons who support me on Ko-fi. We'll get to segmentation later on in the presentation, but I have a newsletter that goes out to everybody who's signed up once a week because I have a lot to share. Because I've got 3 running webcomics. I have a YouTube channel with live streams. I have convention appearances and workshops that I do. I have shop updates and sometimes Kickstarter and crowdfunder updates. And I share all of that in my newsletter, plus email newsletter specific webcomics, shout outs to community members' Kickstarter campaigns, and calls for mutual aid with their permission. I try to ask permission first before I add that to the newsletter. Here's how I structure mine. Now, this is not like a perfect picture. This was what I could fit onto the screen in one slide. But I structure my newsletter so that there's like the title, there's the webcomic page, because I try to offer newsletter specific web comics to my subscribers as much as I can, like Thoughtful Dinosaur, Charlie and Cloud the Bonus Arc, New Punk Signal, and for a little while, Puzzle Spell were all newsletter exclusive web comics. They're now available as free PDFs on my shop, but I like to offer newsletter exclusive web comics when I can. Below the webcomic update, I'll have a segment that's dedicated to like, oh, I'm going to be making this convention appearance. And then there's a little green section below that that's like, here's what's happening on YouTube. And then there's a block for what happened last week. And that's where I share my webcomic updates for the past week or any YouTube updates from that past week. And then I have a little segment for Meanwhile in the shop. That's where I post my shop and Kickstarter and crowdfunder updates. And then there's the section below that that's mutual aid asks, where I share like Kickstarters and crowdfunders from community members and mutual aid calls with their permission. The mutual aid calls I often see posted on the Fantasyville Discord first. And I will reach out to the person and be like, hey, do you still need this signal boost that I can put this in my newsletter? And sometimes they'll say, no, I've already met the goal. And that's great. So I can move on and post like a Kickstarter update or like somebody else's Kickstarter or something else in that section of the newsletter. Sometimes I don't have anything for that section, and that's okay. So I can just like skip that and keep it short. I try to keep my newsletter to 2 to 3 swipes on mobile, because I don't want this to be super duper long. I know other people have other stuff to do, and I just want this to be like a quick little digest. Here's what's been happening. Ko-fi members will get longer emails because my Ko-fi members get things like access to my comic scripts, access to the comic pages in progress, rewards that are specific to my Ko-fi members, and early webcomic updates. So the Ko-fi member segment of my newsletter runs longer. So it goes like anywhere between like 4 to 6 swipes on mobile. Which email service do I use? I use MailerLite. It's free for the first 5,000 subscribers. You can schedule newsletters in advance. There's really easy segmentation to get your newsletter subscribers into groups. Again, we'll cover that later. The thing to mention about MailerLite is that you do need a professional email to send out newsletters from. You cannot send out newsletters from a Gmail email, for example. You have to have something like Kelsey at fantasyvilleproductions.com, for example, to send out your emails through MailerLite. You can use a Gmail to log into the service, but you'd need a professional-ish email to send email newsletters out if you're using MailerLite. I have heard good things about Button Down and Beehive. I know some folks who use both of those platforms, and I haven't heard any complaints. I do not know what the price points are for Beehive, but Button Down, the pricing for that per month varies on like how many subscribers that you have, and also whether you're a nonprofit or not. They have discounts available for nonprofits. I've seen a service called Ghost, but Ghost costs money. And I've not used it myself. I have a colleague of mine who uses it. I've not heard any complaints, so they must be doing something right. I am weary of Substack and MailChimp, but for two different reasons. I am weary of Substack because Substack has a lot of TERFs and neo-Nazis that use their service. Um, those TERFs and neo-Nazis have been chased off of other platforms and they go to Substack, and Substack just lets them use their platform. And is actually really excited to monetize with them. So make of that what you will. If you're on Substack already and you want to try to find another service to use, Button Down makes it really easy to migrate from Substack to Button Down. Like they have the flow set up for you so that you can take advantage of that. I am also weary of MailChimp for a very different reason. MailChimp used to be my email servicer. And I have a horror story about this, so brace yourselves. So when I was using MailChimp back in the day, I was going through it to go through the list to see who hadn't opened my emails for a while, who had like a 0% open rate. Because email servicers will tell you like the open rates based on like the subscribers. So it'll be like this subscriber opened this many percentage of your emails. And I was going through MailChimp to look at like who had not opened any emails at all, because I was going to remove them from the list and clean up the list a little bit. And I was like putting the check bar, take two. I was putting the check mark box next to those names, but there was an option at the top of the menu that said select all. And I went, oh, I'll just select all, and that'll select everything on just this window. I did not realize that when I hit select all, it meant select all of the names in the newsletter, including people who were subscribed and opened my newsletter regularly. And then I hit delete. I don't know if MailChimp has updated their UI since this incident, but there was no way for me to recover those emails once they were deleted. So I left MailChimp in a fit of rage and I switched to MailerLite instead. I've now gotten to a point, happily, with MailerLite where I now have more subscribers on MailerLite than I ever did on MailChimp. So I'm really happy about that. Honestly, if you can make MailChimp work for you, that's great. I don't know if they have fixed this UI element. But after that incident, I was like, never again. Not doing that again. Um, oh no, I just saw in the comments that apparently they sure have not. Oh, that's so unfortunate. Yeah, I'm going to double down on the whole be wary of MailChimp then, if that's the case. Oh my gosh. That's unfortunate, and I'm so sorry. But yeah, learn from our mistakes. Do not use MailChimp, just use MailerLite. MailerLite is way easier to work with in that regard. All right. I'm going to talk about some back-end stuff. This is the part where I'm going to talk about segmentation of the newsletters. So you can break your subscriber list into groups when you're using MailerLite. You might be able to do this with other platforms like Button Down and Beehive, but I'm not sure because I've not used those ones. But with MailerLite, you can segment your subscriber list into groups. I like to segment my audience based on whether they are a Ko-fi member or not. whether they signed up at a convention, what specific convention they signed up at, if they signed up through my website, because I have a pop-up on my website that's like sign up for my newsletter, and there's a little box for folks to fill in. Um, I do have it set so that if you close that newsletter sign up window on my website, it doesn't pop back up for like a week because I try to respect other people's time. But yeah, for segmentation purposes, I actually keep track of who signs up through that box on my website. When I go to conventions, I take an email sign up sheet so that folks can give me their name and their email address. And then when I'm done with the convention, I will put the name of the convention at the bottom of the list and the date that it happened. Because part of the reason that I was able to recover from the MailChimp fiasco was because I kept all of those paper sign-up sheets in a file box, and I very kindly asked my sibling, and I compensated them for this, to copy down all the stuff from those paper sign-up sheets and put them into a spreadsheet so that I could then import that spreadsheet into MailerLite. So keep paper copies if you're going to have paper sign-up sheets. They will save your butt. But yeah, no, I like to do segments based on conventions because of this next slide. With the magic of segments, you can do special incentives and rewards. Like, are you going back to a convention that you did last year? You can make a special email for that segment of your newsletter, and you can let them know, hey, if you stop at my table at this show again, I have a special reward for you. And I like to do this a lot with the conventions that I circle back to. Those rewards can vary from like a specific merch item that I made for returning customers for that show. It could be, oh, you'll get a free mini print, or oh, you'll get a free mini comic. It can be whatever reward that you want to set. But I like to offer rewards for folks who are on my newsletter who met me at a particular convention. And when I come back the next year, I like to give them special little rewards for coming back. So other thing you can do, the magic of segments. I'm going to talk a little bit about my free RPG Day experiment, because there's a special event that happens every year called Free Role-Playing Game Day. It's usually hosted at gaming stores, and at gaming stores, they'll have a special like table dedicated to free RPGs that you can pick up. There was one year that I was not going to make it in person to Free RPG Day at my local gaming store. So I was like, okay, while I'm away at a friend's wedding, because that was the reason I wasn't going to make it in person, I was like, okay, I'll have a free downloadable of the game that I want to release, and I'm going to start building up hype around this. So what I did was, and this took a couple of months of preparation, to be clear. Thing one, I made a special landing page just for the RPG Day reward. Like, I made a little landing page and I linked it wherever I could, being like, I have a free RPG coming out. Here's where you sign up for updates. That landing page then segmented those emails from that page into their own little group. I would then make special newsletters just for that group of the newsletter, where they can see the behind the scenes stuff. Like, here's some of the mechanics I'm playing around with. Here's some of the game art. Here's the inspiration for the RPG that I'm designing. Those all got featured in these newsletters that went out specifically to people who signed up through that landing page. I built up the hype over several weeks. And then once Free RPG Day came, I released the game. I got so many signups based on this, and I got a lot of game downloads and a lot of interest in the webcomic that was based on the game. That webcomic, by the way, is Puzzle Spell, if you wanted to read that. More info on my website, kelseydcrawford.com. But yeah, with this Free RPG Day experiment, there was a lot of hype that I built up with the game that I designed, plus the webcomic inspired by the game. Got a lot more newsletter signups, got to share some behind the scenes stuff. It was a great time. So goal achieved. You might be looking at this presentation and going, but can this make me money? And I get it. We live in capitalism and we're artists who have to pay our bills. I will say, in my experience, that newsletters have been more successful than social media for a lot of sales. I've done over 20 Kickstarter, Ko-fi, and crowdfunder campaigns. And I want to say that I've done like 26 campaigns. And only two of them did not meet goal, but I learned from those. I could probably do an entire presentation just about like how to do crowdfunding, but still 24v2, pretty good stat. But I've had over 20 successful campaigns powered by the power of my newsletter. So how do you make sales with your newsletter? Well, step one, don't sell right away. You got to build rapport first. Do not sales pitch. That's what corporations do with their newsletters. People signed up to hear from you. So give people updates based on your art. Like, oh, here's this new project that I'm working on, or here's a new appearance that I'm doing, or anything like that. Just do not do sales pitches right away. You're trying to build a rapport with your readers. People signed up to hear from you. Step two, once you've built up the rapport, you build the hype. Shout out to Caleb Palmquist because his newsletter is real good at this. I signed up for his newsletter after backing Unicorn Vampire Hunter issue 1 on Kickstarter. And as far as I know, this man is not on social media anywhere. He only posts on his newsletter, to the best of my knowledge that I know. But with his newsletter, he will share early access to his comics, to at least a handful of comic pages. He will share exclusive covers that are offered through specific Kickstarter campaigns. He'll share character bios for characters that will be making appearances in upcoming issues of his comics. Like, honestly, he does real good stuff. Highly recommend Caleb Palmquist's newsletter just to as a case study for how to build up hype. He's really good at this. With that, we talked about how to build sales with your newsletter. How do you build community with your newsletter? I like to do it this way. Then this has worked for me. I share my email in the newsletter body, or I make it easy for folks to reply. Thankfully, MailerLite has a setting where if you use your professional email to send out those newsletters, that email can be where folks will reply. So like if somebody is replying to your newsletter update, it'll go directly to your email. MailerLite's really good at that. But if you're using another platform, consider putting your email in the newsletter if you feel safe to do so. You can have just a email specific for that newsletter if that makes things easier. You can also share your other links, like if you have a Discord server or if you're on Discord and you feel comfortable sharing that information, if you have a webcomic, or if for some reason you're still on social media, here's where you can share your links. Have a sign up sheet at your convention table and tell people about how awesome your newsletter is. And you can give community updates like, oh, we raised this much for this particular cause. Like if there's like a charity event, or if there's maybe free RPG day, you can be like, hey, so-and-so has this free RPG. It looks really cool. You should go check it out. That's also a great way to build community on the newsletter. Now go break some news letters. Alrighty, I'm going to stop the screen share and I'm going to get into the Q&A segments.
That was awesome. You know, I'm going to go ahead and do you want me to let people to unmute themselves and ask you questions directly, or would you rather they raise their hands and then I'll unmute them for you?
Well, step one, I'm going to catch up on the live chat.
Alrighty.
And then once I've caught up on the live chat, maybe we can do like folks raising their hands or um
We'll do raised
unmuting
hands.
themselves if they want to ask.
Sounds
Um,
good. If you
okay.
don't know where the raise hand feature is, just go to the bottom of Zoom and there is a raise hand button. You just click that and then I'll go ahead and unmute you if you wish to ask a question, or you can ask it in chat. Both
Yes.
chat.
Oh, shout out to Tech for posting the link to Corey Doctorow's lecture that I mentioned. Um, so shout out for that. Thank you, Tech. Um, Ooh, Jesse says, loving my experience with Button Down. Also, glad to see I'm not alone in not liking MailChimp. You are not alone in that. Oh, I almost forgot. Mikoto said that they use ConvertKit. That's another one that I know about, but I don't know entirely how it works. But ConvertKit is an option for folks. Um, for sure, Substack has major baggage. Um, Ooh, Tech mentioned I have another friend who uses Ghost. You can do some Patreon alike stuff on it. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so it sounds like Ghost does segmentation where it's like, oh, if you pay this much for access to my newsletter, you can get these particular rewards. It's interesting. Um, huh. Oh, yeah, and then everybody reacting to when I told my story about MailChimp. Um,
Jesse just posted a question. Do you want me to read it aloud for you?
yes, please.
Jesse says, "How far in advance do you draft your newsletters? Do you keep a buffer?"
Um, it depends on what's going on like outside of work. Like I'm gonna have to schedule my newsletters a couple of weeks in advance pretty soon because I'm gonna be moving at the end of the month. So I will need to schedule my newsletters out in advance because of that. Um I typically, my usual workflow is that I will draft the newsletter throughout the week as the week progresses, and then I get everything um, scheduled and organized the night before it goes out. Um, that's typically how I do it. But again, with certain life circumstances, sometimes I have to plan in advance. But the nice thing with MailerLite is that it does let you schedule in advance, sometimes like way in advance. So that's really nice. Um, yeah, my recommendation would be well, it also depends on what you want your newsletter to be. Because I want my newsletter to be like basically a digest where folks can catch up with what it is that I'm doing. And if there's anything exciting happening that particular weekend, then I can shout it out then. So it can be really contingent on like what's going on like within that week, which is why I don't typically schedule out in advance. But if you're the kind of person that wants to share your works in progress and behind the scenes stuff, you can schedule that as far in advance as you want. So it really depends on what your goals are for your newsletter and what you want your newsletter to be as far as like how far out in advance you want to schedule ahead. Um, yes. So, okay. I'm glad that folks are getting ideas from the presentation. That's fantastic. Um, okay, if anybody has any questions.
So Twill has a question down at the bottom, and Jesse has a question. Do you want me to read them aloud for you, or do you want to read them?
Oh, I just got to them.
There you go. I'm
Tool
pinning the
app.
ones for you, questions.
Oh,
So they pop out.
fantastic. Thank you.
There you go.
Um, I see Tool asks, how do you handle overwhelm related to posting weekly and tiered newsletters? And how would you suggest others handle that based on the sheer volume of time you're spending working? I love that working is in quotes. Um, so how do I handle overwhelm related to posting weekly? So I'm the kind of person that I put together a Trello board of my content calendar. And if anybody has used Trello before, it's a Kanban system where it's like column A, column B, column C. I have my content calendar arranged so that like column A is Monday, B is Tuesday, C is Wednesday, and each card is a different thing that goes out on that particular day. Um, So I like to actually schedule in advance based on that. So I'll go into my content calendar and I'll be like, oh, today's a Tuesday. That means that blog post is going to go up. Or, oh, today's Thursday. I have to draft my newsletter and then I got to get that scheduled. Um, yeah, I see a lot of folks are using Trello. That's fantastic. Yeah, I use Trello for my content calendar, and that's how I keep track of stuff. But the way that I organize my newsletter is that I have like four sections. Section A is the announcement. Section B is what happened last week. Section C is meanwhile in the shop. And then section D is the mutual aid ask. Or in the past, I had that segment dedicated to like interviews with creators that I would post up on my website, stuff like that. Again, it's your newsletter. It's flexible. Make it what you want it to be. Um, so yeah, it's sometimes to make it easier to deal with all of that. I just have my newsletter in sections and I write based on the section that I'm writing for. So that's how I deal with that. With the Ko-fi specific newsletter, I do the same thing. It's all sections. Like section 1 will be, this is the Legend of Jamie Roberts updates. Section 2, Vanita and the Demon King. Section 3, An Ignorance of Romance. Section 4, peek behind the curtain at what's going on in my life. And then section D, here are some of the zines that I'm working on that I want to send out to you later this month. I am nothing if not organized. I really like to keep things all tidy if I can. Okay, let's see. Jesse asks, how often do you go through and review the stats? Especially curious about how you do that with multiple segments. So it depends. One other thing about MailerLite, and I didn't touch on this in the presentation, but you can also do what's called A/B testing. With the free plan for MailerLite, A/B testing is where you can test what headers to use for your email to be like, oh, if I title my update with this for group A, or maybe this for group B, you can see like which group opened more newsletters based on like what heading that you used. Um, so you can track stuff that way if you choose. Um, how often do I go through and review the stats? It did, oh, as far as like new newsletter subscribers, I try to do that once a month. At least this year, because one of my goals this year is that I want to reach 1,000 newsletter subscribers before the end of the year. I'm almost halfway there. So the fact that I'm almost halfway there and it's like May, I'm like, good progress so far. But I I try to go through the stats like once a month just to see how things are going. I don't typically keep track of like the open rates, but that's because I have a higher than average open rate. If MailChimp was anything to go by, back when I used MailChimp, they had a little like dedicated portion of their website that was like, oh, you're in this industry? Here's the average stats of your industry. And since I was technically an arts and culture newsletter, it would be like the average open rate for an arts and culture newsletter is 2%. And I'm like, my open rate varies anywhere between 27 and 50%. So I have a higher than average open rate. um, so like that's great and all. The reason that that number is not higher is it can vary for a lot of reasons. Sometimes the newsletter just gets filtered into spam, and that's not my fault. Sometimes if subscribers are anything like me, sometimes when I get a newsletter from another creator, I'll be like, oh, I want to get to that, but I can't get to that right now, so I'll just put this in a folder and I'll read it for later. And then later never comes. So if newsletter subscribers are anything like me, sometimes that just happens. And sometimes it just sits there unopened, and that's okay. I'm not going to begrudge them for that because I do. Um, so yeah, as far as the stats that I look at, I really only pay attention to them like hardcore if I'm on a campaign, like the free RPG Day campaign that I talked about before. That's when I start to keep track of like, okay, I tried this header and more folks opened this one. Or, okay, I got a lot of open rates on this one, so I got to do more of that. Or, oh, I got a lot of click-throughs because MailerLite also keeps track of their click-through rate, not just your open rate. Like it'll tell you how many people opened up your newsletter and then clicked on something in that newsletter. I don't know if other newsletter servicers do this. They should. That's usually standard like practice. MailerLite does this. I know that. So if you're like in the middle of a campaign, it is helpful to look at stats like that. Oh man,
You've gotten a lot of questions.
I got a lot of questions.
They're all
Uh,
little pins in our thumbs. So do you want
yeah.
me to
Yeah, if you could read the next one because I'm having a hard time keeping up with these
it's
now.
scrolling, yes. Let's see. We had overwhelm. I think the next one is Mateus. What do you
Okay.
think is the most effective way to announce a new newsletter if you've never done one before? Is social media a good idea or just have it on a website somewhere?
Yes. Um, my recommendation would be if you have a website, share your newsletter link on your website. If you're still on social media, tell folks on social media that you have a newsletter, and if you can share the link for that, do that. Um, I know that Instagram punished people for putting links in posts directly, so you have to put like the link in the bio. I don't think that they've changed that practice necessarily.
They have
Um,
not.
I didn't think that they would. So yeah, if you can put the link in the bio, do that. Um, but if you have a website, share your link to your newsletter on your website. MailerLite has a feature where it does require a little bit of coding, but I use WordPress, so MailerLite can integrate with WordPress pretty easily. Um, you can integrate it so that MailerLite will have a little pop-up window that's like sign up for the newsletter. And you can actually track the stats for that. You can track like how many people sign up for your newsletter using that pop-up window. Um, I am surprised that the little pop-up that I have for my own website, because I use the same code for like my website, my webcomic sites, all of that. The sign up rate is somewhere between like 50 and 75%. It's like unusually high. Um, so I'm glad that I put that little pop-up window there.
Yeah.
But if you have just a little box on your website that's like sign up for my newsletter, that also works. So yeah, if you put a link on your website or you link it on your social media, just be sure to let people know what is on your newsletter. That way they know what it is that they're signing up for.
So, next question's from Gracie.
Mhm.
How long do you usually spend creating your newsletters each week?
Like an hour.
Wow.
Like an hour a week. For me, it's like I've been doing this for like 10 plus years. I've gotten this to a point where it's like super streamlined. Um, if it takes me more than an hour, that's because I did not do the prep work ahead of time. Um, So, yeah, for me, I've gotten to a point where I can take like an hour a week to get everything set up, scheduled, and all of that. I do see that Julie just asked, do you keep a public archive of the newsletter? I do not, but I should. Um, I know that my buddy Ben Wright Human does. He actually posts a copy of his newsletter. He posts it on Patreon and on his website. Um, but that's a practice that I really should do more is having a public archive of my newsletter. I didn't think to do that, but I should.
So, Jesse asks, is
Mhm.
there a particular kind of content you've noticed for your newsletters that gets people more excited than other kinds? Do you survey, poll your subscribers from time to time?
I do poll my subscribers from time to time, not super duper often. And I haven't done a poll based on my newsletter for a while. But based on the replies that I get directly from the newsletter updates that I send out, because a lot of my fans like to directly reply to my emails. Especially if I pose a question to them, like, hey, what do you think of this thing? They will often just reply directly to the newsletter and it gets to me. So I've noticed the thing that folks are the most jazzed about are the email specific web comics that I like to produce. I mentioned before that I made Thoughtful Dinosaur, New Punk Signal, and Charlie and Cloud, the bonus arc, as newsletter exclusive web comics. Like, I did not have them posted anywhere else online except for the email newsletter. Um, which is really why I should start posting an archive of them somewhere. But um that's how I like to do it. And it's also like the feature that folks really like to see on my email newsletter. Folks also, I think, appreciate the little what happened last week segment where I share like webcomic updates from the past week to let folks know what happened the last time. Um, so, but yeah, based on the feedback that I've been getting, a lot of folks really like the email specific web comics that I post.
Now, on this next question from Nero, I think you actually already answered some of this, but
Hmm.
I am going to bump this question so you can read it because it's a long one. He asks, do you advertise there being an archive at all? I've had issues making sure there's an easily accessible back catalog of newsletters for new signups to read, but I'm not sure how much that really matters to people. I usually don't back read myself, but I wasn't sure how common that is.
Uh, I actually don't really back read my newsletters at all. Um, but that's my thing. Um, I have to ask Ben what his feedback is on that because, like I said, my buddy Ben archives all of his newsletters on his website so that the public can read them. Um, so I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question. Could you ask the question again just to make sure that I heard it right?
Yeah, you can actually, I've bumped it so you could read it if you
Mm.
need to see it visually.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes
Okay.
it's easier to read them. I reread. You just scroll up just a little bit.
Oh
You
yeah,
see
yeah.
it?
Let me. How does one bump?
Oh, did it not show up? Um,
uh, oh,
no, it didn't bump.
bump. Ah, there it is. Okay. Do you advertise there being an archive? I've had issues making sure there's an easily accessible back catalog of newsletters for new signups to read. I usually don't. Okay. Um, yeah, no, I don't tend to advertise having an archive of newsletters because I don't keep an archive of my newsletters. But again, my open read is anywhere between 27 and 50%. So I don't get the impression that that particular that particularly matters to my newsletter subscribers. If that matters to your newsletter subscribers, definitely figure out a way to make that work. Um, but because my newsletter is more of like a weekly digest to be like, here's what happened last week. Here's some other things that are coming up within the next week and all of that. Like, because mine is like a digest, if people miss an update, then they can just catch up the following week. Um, yeah, that's something that's like double check your stats and maybe pull your newsletter subscribers and see if that would be of interest to them. Um, that would be my recommendations on it.
Alrighty. So next two questions, I actually just copy pasted them for you, but I'll read them aloud.
Okay.
Twill says, you mentioned not to sell straight away. Is it still okay to connect to things like Ko-fi, Patreon straight away though?
You can mention that you have those platforms. In my experience, I think it honestly depends on like why it is that folks signed up for your newsletter in the first place. Because if folks signed up for like, oh, I have a Kickstarter coming out soon, maybe don't plug Patreon and Ko-fi right away. If you plugged your newsletter saying like, oh, I have this shop and the newsletters where I post these updates, that's what folks signed up for your newsletter for. Um, if you told people, oh, I have a Patreon campaign happening and I'm giving updates on my newsletter, that's when you can start telling people about your Patreon page or your Ko-fi page. Like it's really contingent on like why you encourage people to sign up in the first place. Um, that would be my feedback on that.
Alrighty. So Mikoto asks next, do you do A/B testing before or during the start of a campaign? I think you answered this a little already.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I typically do before a campaign. Um, though it kind of depends. But it's usually before a campaign just so I can see like what works to entice people to open and what doesn't.
So we're actually caught up. We got two here at the bottom. Molly
Ooh.
asks, my interests, thoughts, and ideas tend to bounce all over the place. How can I build connection with people through newsletters if it feels like I'm all over the place?
Um, I feel like just looking at the beginning of that, it's like, oh, we've already got three categories. We have your interests, your thoughts, and your ideas. So if you want to segment your newsletter based on like, here's not segment, but like if you want to split up your newsletter update into like, here's my interests, here's my thoughts, and here's my ideas. Um, you can absolutely do it like that. Like I've followed some folks' newsletters. I see, oh my God, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, I've seen some folks' newsletters where they actually do something like that, where they'll just have a section that's just like the thing I want to ramble about. And that's totally okay. Um, honestly, I love those kinds of newsletters because it feels like I'm like it's not like I'm reading a one-sided conversation, but it is kind of feeling like I'm reading somebody's diary, and that makes me feel a little bit naughty, and that's why it appeals to me. um, but
I
yeah,
love
maybe
this.
consider doing something like that.
Mikoto also asks, how do you usually create engagement replies through your newsletter's content? And you actually just started addressing that one. So,
Oh, where it's like I pose a question to my subscribers and I encourage them to reply. Yeah, I often do that, especially if there's something that I'm like stuck on, or if there's something that I like really need community feedback for. I'll be like, hey, question. Uh, if you have suggestions, reply to this email, or here's a link to my Discord so that you can comment on Discord. Um, that's that's often how I do it, is that if I have to pose a question to my readers on my newsletter, I will include a little segment that's like, here's the email you can reply to, or you can reply to this newsletter. Um, yeah, that's how I do it.
well, we're caught up on questions. Oh, wait, Jesse has one now. Have you ever
Aha.
had any legal challenges with that kind of feedback? Like people trying to claim credits for an idea you pursued? Oof.
Actually, well, knock on wood, not yet. But I typically try to give credit when I can. Like, I actually gave credit to one of my newsletter subscribers because he actually gave a suggestion that led to the title "An Ignorance of Romance," which is the new webcomic that I'm working on. Um, so I try to give credit when I can, to be like, oh, so and so suggested, um, stuff like that. Um, Yeah, no, ideas are not copyrightable, but I try to give credit when I can. Because honestly, with Fantasyville, with Fantasyville, the company that I run, as well as my newsletter, it does feel like a community project. And I try to give credit to the community when I can for stuff like that.
Alrighty. I any more questions?
Yeah, if folks have any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat, or you can raise your digital hand, um,
Yes.
and go from there. I did see somebody. Oh,
Jesse asks, where can we subscribe to your newsletter, Kelsey?
that was the question I was about to reference, because that was posted
Yay.
earlier, and I'm so glad that they circled back to that. So I'm going to get my link really quick. So
Yes.
one of the other handy things about having the content calendar Trello board is that I can save my link to my newsletter on a card so that if I want people to sign up, I can just copy paste that thing and it works. So let me get that link really quick. Cooperate with me, Trello. There we go. Yes, you can also sign up through my website. I just posted the link where you can subscribe to my email newsletter. My email newsletter sends out on Fridays. Because I've done the experimenting and I found that the best time for folks to open my newsletter is Fridays. Absolutely play around with it with your own and see what works for you.
I never would have thought there would have been like a particular day that people were more likely to open newsletters. But it kind
Yeah. In my experience, it's Mondays and Fridays.
of
Mondays because it's like the start of the work week and people are like catching up on emails, and Fridays because they're catching emails before they leave for the weekend.
yeah.
That's been my experience. I mean,
Do
I've
they just
also
disappear on the weekend? Like no
I,
one checks anything?
I don't think anybody checks anything on the weekends unless it's YouTube, in my experience. People will check YouTube on weekends.
Yes. All righty. I think we've wow, and it's 12:01. So we're right on time too. Good
Heck yeah.
timing.
Vogue
Well,
to celebrate.
thank you, Kelsey. If everyone in the chat or video or whatever you want to do, I would love if y'all could give some applause or thank Kelsey. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that this was helpful for folks. It sounds like it was.
It was.
Yes. And thank you,
Absolutely.
Rivka and Nero, for hosting and everything. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to Niven Ink Fest. And just so you'll know, we have another event coming up here at 1 o'clock, which is actually in an hour, which is how to print a comic at pre-press panel. So hopefully we'll see you guys here again in an hour. All right, Kelsey. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. See
Thank
you at the next
you.
workshop.